Earlier this year, a study was published in which researchers asked autistic adults a simple question: what made or would have made your childhood a good one? Their answers offer a broader way for us to think about what a good life can look like for our children. So often we define a good future by the milestones we can see from the outside: communication, friendships, work, independence. The study suggests that that's only part of the picture. It identifies 4 dimensions of a good life, according to autistic adults, that are worth paying attention to. If we haven't met yet, I'm Andrea Pollack. I'm a parenting educator and coach for parents of autistic and neurodivergent children. I'm also the parent of a 27-year-old autistic young man with pretty high support needs. So this study resonated with me because it gave me language, a framework, and research grounded in autistic adults' lived experience to support something I had come to believe through raising my son. Before we look at the 4 dimensions, it helps for us to understand why this study feels different. So much of the conversation around autism has focused on visible outcomes. Again, independent living, employment, academic achievement, basically the ability to function in environments designed around neurotypical expectations. And those outcomes are not irrelevant, but they don't tell us everything about whether a person's life is a good one. Someone can have a degree, a job, and an apartment while spending every day exhausted from masking and trying to meet expectations that don't fit. Someone else may need substantial support through their life while experiencing deep relationships, interests, safety, and joy. The outside picture gives us important information. I'm not dismissing that. This study gives us a broader perspective. Rather than asking what success looks like from the outside, researchers asked autistic adults, drawing on their own lived experience, what contributes to a good childhood and a good life. They also asked parents of autistic children, and many of the parents were autistic themselves, the same question from a different perspective. Both groups identified the same 4 dimensions. And when autistic adults and parents independently arrive at the same themes, I think it's worth paying attention. The first dimension is feeling accepted. Not accepted because you learned to camouflage your autism, not accepted because you became indistinguishable from everyone else, accepted as the person you are. That doesn't mean never encouraging growth. It doesn't mean lowering expectations. It means not sending the message that your worth depends on becoming less autistic. The researchers describe acceptance as being valued, understood, and able to be yourself without constantly feeling that who you are needs to be fixed. Parents sometimes ask, how do I help my child grow while also accepting them as they are? And this study demonstrates that those are not conflicting goals. In fact, I believe that genuine acceptance creates the foundation that makes growth more possible. The second theme is finding the things that, as the researchers put it, these are their words, light the child up. The things that they would choose to do for hours simply because they enjoy them. The examples in this study are wonderfully specific. One parent described her son's love of the sea. He would walk for hours along the waterline, fascinated by the waves and the feeling of the sand beneath his feet. Another child lit up watching magpies and catching skinks in the garden. I don't know what any of those words mean, but that was his passion. Another was happiest wearing a headset, listening to music while playing a computer game. Her mother said, you can just look at her and know she's in the happiest place in the world. None of those interests needed to be productive or social or impressive. They mattered because they brought genuine joy. A good life has room for the things that light us up, even when they don't serve any purpose beyond bringing joy. The third theme is having a sense of control over your own life. A sense of control doesn't mean a child runs the household. It doesn't mean no boundaries, and it certainly doesn't mean safety becomes negotiable. It means agency. It means having a personal say in things that impact your life to the extent that that's possible. Maybe what you wear, what you eat, whether to tell someone you're autistic, being allowed to say no. One family in the study developed a quiet signal. Their son would whisper, "Mommy, I feel peopled out," when he'd reached his limit in a social setting. That's a child exercising control over one of the hardest things there is, recognizing his own capacity and communicating it before becoming overwhelmed. I'll speak from my own experience for a moment. My son is 27, as I mentioned, and he still needs 24/7 supervision. People sometimes assume that that would mean control comes off the table, but we found the opposite. We offer him choices everywhere we safely can. Over the years, I've come to believe that the more genuine control we give him whenever it's safely possible, the more willing he is to collaborate with us when his safety or support needs require our input. This isn't a technique, it's a relationship that's been built over years. The fourth theme is having environments that fit the child's sensory needs. This theme came through especially strong in the parents' interview. One parent described how her son could spend hours happily at the park when it was quiet, but withdrew completely once it became crowded. Same park, same child, different sensory load. Another parent described the enormous effort her son spent simply trying to exist in environments that didn't fit his nervous system. The sensory input in his environment impacted how much he could access it. Autistic adults also described their experience. Some remembered migraines triggered by lights, sounds, or smells. One said unmet sensory needs taught her that the world was a scary place. If I'd had this framework when my son was young, I might have worried less about his future. When he was little, the gap between what he could do and what other children his age could do kept getting wider. And I carried a constant worry beneath the surface about what adulthood would look like, because I was measuring his future almost entirely by the milestones everyone else was measuring. Now at 27, he loves his life, and he never read this study, but he's accepted for who he is. He's surrounded by what lights him up. For example, he loves sorting the recycling, and I've stopped needing that to make sense to anyone else. He has as much control over his days as we can safely give him, and his world is built for him. He landed on all four dimensions without anyone telling him the framework. And I'll tell you about my daughter too, because she's the other half of what I've learned. She has 2 Ivy League degrees, she's working on her PhD, and recently got married. The world looks at her life and hands it a gold star. But here's what it took me years to understand. The world would rank them. Her life first, his life way at the bottom. But I don't see it that way, because the things this study identifies as making a good life, my daughter needs every bit as much as my son does. Her degrees didn't hand them to her. She built that good life herself, on her own ground, the same way he built his. So his life isn't a smaller one. When examined through the lens of this study, they both come out in a pretty good place. This study didn't tell me that my son was living a good life. I already knew that. But what it gave me was a framework grounded in autistic adults' lived experience that I can bring into conversations far beyond my own family story. I hope this study continues to shape the conversations we have about autism. When autistic adults tell us what contributes to a good life, they're giving us something incredibly valuable. Not a checklist, a different lens through which we understand what we're working toward. I hope this video gave you a new way to think about the future. If you enjoyed it, I hope you'll consider subscribing, giving it a like, and I'll see you in the next one.